Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, originally one of the most polarizing and infamous Zeldas by the time of its 2011 release, was at one point one of the most hated titles in the franchise. This was thanks to the 2010 E3 tech demo that flopped horribly.
Somebody out there using wireless? Anybody? Everything went really well in our rehearsals. You guys need to turn off all your wireless devices.
As well as numerous problems with the game itself by its release. It was only thanks to the HD re-release of the game for the Switch that this title finally got the respect that I personally think it deserves. As someone who only got into Zelda 5 years ago, Skyward Sword has always been a long-awaited title in my library. Simply the title alone had me ecstatic to try the game, and after my first playthrough it was cemented as my all-time favorite title in the franchise. And yes, I've played most of the 3D Zeldas except for Twilight Princess, as well as Majora's Mask. With all this being said, since a lot of people's first experience, or rather first good experience, came with the HD port to the Switch, with a lot of players, myself included, even using a gamepad instead of motion controls, this Zelda quickly gained a cult-like fanbase and remains to this day one of the greatest comebacks in the history of gaming. As many people are just now getting to experience the game in its full glory, I decided to do an iceberg video for the series, discussing some of the deeper lore, in-game mechanics, and even some fan theories, as this Zelda is packed to the brim with interesting lore, facts, and in-game mechanics. If you've never watched an iceberg video before, the top of the iceberg starts off with normal and even well-known facts about the topic, and as we move down, layer by layer, the facts become more obscure and even sometimes cursed, as the bottom of the iceberg tends to have darker facts almost unknown to the majority of the fanbase. The iceberg that I'm using in today's video was posted to the r/Zelda subreddit by user ScoutXPlays77. So a big shout out to them for providing us with this iceberg. As well as Scout Plays Iceberg, I'm going to be adding in any interesting facts that I find, as I feel like there's so many interesting topics to touch on with this Zelda. To do so, I'll be adding in an honorable mention section at the end of each level. Before starting, I wanted to add a fair spoiler warning, as this video will contain spoilers, and although I will do my best to give warnings, watch at your own discretion. As always, I can't guarantee the authenticity of some of these, but corrections are always welcome in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into the tip of the Zelda Skyward Sword iceberg. Hidden rupees. Both in the land of Skyloft and down below on the surface, there are a wide variety of locations in which you can find hidden rupees. Now, before I show you how to actually get any rupees, we should probably upgrade our wallet. We can do that by finding Patro, who you can find by pushing this gravestone at night, which will open up a door that leads you to him. You can find him only after completing the Kukil questline, which is only available after placing the second piece of the ancient tablet and unlocking Eldin Volcano. After placing the second piece of the tablet, upon leaving the area, you can actually spot Kukil's mother, who is waiting to ask for help finding her missing daughter. Upon completion of the quest, you discover that Kukil was actually hiding out with Patro in his house, lair, in his hideout. After finding him, he will give you some sob story. Ignore that. What we want to do is focus on the gratitude crystals that he desires. We can get gratitude crystals by doing a number of good deeds around Skyloft, but you can also find some in Skyloft as well as the islands around Skyloft at night. After bringing him 40 or so, he'll upgrade our wallet to the medium wallet. Now, the best way to get some big bucks in Skyward Sword is easily by finding the goddess cubes. The first cube I'll show you is the goddess cube behind the goddess statue at Skyview Spring. Once done, head over to Pumpkin Landing and land on top of the building. You should find a chest here containing a gold rupee. There are a multitude of ways to unlock these hidden rupees. The goddess cubes alone give you a great deal of loot, so make sure to make use of them. Boulders can kill. To my knowledge, this entry is referring to the boulders that the bokoblins throw down the hill at you at the base of Eldin Volcano. These bokoblins can be a pain, as they constantly berate you with these boulders when you already have enough difficulty walking up these hills as is. Once you have a bow, claw shots, or a slingshot, essentially a long-ranged item, you can actually shoot the bokoblins, causing them to drop the boulder on top of themselves, and thus squishing the life out of them. When the enemies simply puff into a cloud of smoke, it makes you forget just how graphic some of their deaths can be.
When I can't get...
Beginning murals. The opening cutscene in Skyward Sword, the one that plays before you press start, is actually a pretty violent story, showing some pretty graphic imagery of Demise, the Demon King, launching an all-out assault on innocent civilians. I won't show the whole thing here in case you've never watched it for yourself, as it does dive deep into the beginning of the lore of Zelda. But here we can see the flames purging the surface land as demons march to cause chaos and destruction. The script literally uses the words, "they murdered without hesitation," painting a very dark picture, especially considering we know and love a lot of the descendants of these people that were possibly tortured to death at the hands of the Demon King and his demon army. Hero mode quotes. Once completing the game, you are given the option to start a new game in hero mode. I believe this does replace your save data, but you do get to start with a fully powered up Skyward Strike, as well as all the insects and things that you found throughout your playthrough. But what this entry focuses on is the changes to some of the dialogue in hero mode. These changes are minor mostly, just summed up as certain characters acknowledging that you are in hero mode and giving you their props for doing so. Instructor Hornwell, for example, says, "Good morning to you, Link. I'm impressed with your decision to test your resolve in hero mode. Oh, and today is the day of your long-awaited ceremony," whereas previously he would just wish you a good morning and then go on to remind you of the ceremony. Fi, as well, painfully reminds you of your decision every time that you are low on hearts, as hearts are not commonly found during hero mode unless you do have the heart medal. I'm sure there are a lot more quotes, but they all pretty much just acknowledge that Link is an absolute Chad for playing in hero mode. Bird crap. This entry refers to the lovely Gwei, which is a type of bird found in the Faerun Woods region. When aggravated by Link, instead of attempting to attack the player, the bird actually defecates on Link's head. Yeah, Link gets pooped on. This attack, if you can even call it that, actually drains Link's stamina, which is a very disgusting addition, but an addition nonetheless. Thank you, Gwei. Quicksand can kill. Now, I don't exactly know what this entry is referring to, as it's pretty vague, but yes, the quicksand most commonly found in the Lanayru mine is known to be quite lethal. As you can see here, bokoblins, as well as other enemies I'm sure, can actually drown to death in the quicksand instead of the normal death animation of puffing into a cloud of smoke. As the bokoblins drown in sand, you can see them clearly struggle and cry out in fear. Again, such a brutal death when you think about it, and who really knows the amount of lives that this quicksand has taken. Gaypora, Ocarina of Time. In Ocarina of Time, young Link often encounters a mysterious owl who gives him wisdom. This owl's name? Gaypora Gaybora. As you may know, Gaypora is a character in Skyward Sword. He is Zelda's father as well as the headmaster of the Knight Academy. But if we take a closer look at Gaypora, he bears quite the resemblance to both the owl Gaypora and, spoiler alert, his true form, the Sage of Light, Rauru. Looking at these three characters side by side, there's no doubt that Gaypora from Skyward Sword is directly designed with Rauru and Gaypora in mind. Perhaps since Skyward Sword is the start of the Zelda timeline, maybe Rauru is a direct descendant of Gaypora, even taking on a similar name in his owl form as Gaypora Gaybora. Skyloft Bell Toll. Although I am unsure, my best guess is that this entry is referring to having to shoot the bell in order to get access to Beetle's ship. Once you shoot the bell, Beetle then sends down a rope for you to get a lift up to his shop. But this just seemed far too mundane of an entry simply because this is something that is kind of required to do in order to progress in the game. And though many people initially struggle finding out how to do this, with me finding multiple online forums of players asking how to access Beetle's ship, I wanted to kind of dig deeper into Beetle's shop. And it does turn out that if you enter Beetle's shop later in the game, having a lot of items equipped, if you actually do not purchase anything and go to leave, Beetle will get quite mad, as you are very heavy now, and he finds it disrespectful that you'd make him carry all that extra weight without even buying so much as one item. He will then kick you out by way of trapdoor. Now this is pretty rude of Beetle, but honestly, can you blame him? Zelda's Lullaby. This entry refers to the popular longtime Zelda song, originally composed by the great Koji Kondo, Zelda's Lullaby. Although Zelda's Lullaby does play in Skyward Sword, and fittingly, as Zelda puts herself to sleep, this entry refers to the main track of Zelda Skyward Sword, Ballad of the Goddess. Ballad of the Goddess is a beautifully scored piece of video game music, and personally one of my favorites of all time. But did you know that this amazing track actually is just Zelda's Lullaby, but in reverse? If you don't believe me, here's the tracks side by side. still not convinced, let's reverse Zelda's Lullaby and see what we get. As you can see, Ballad of Goddess is simply reversed and raised in key. This amazing little flip has created a fan favorite Zelda track, and it's reasons like this why Koji Kondo and Nintendo have dominated the video game music scene since their early days. Skipper Titanic. This entry refers to the popular fan favorite Skyward Sword character, Captain Skipper. Somewhere in the Lanayru Desert, you can actually find this framed picture of either Skipper or some of his crewmates reenacting a scene from the popular movie Titanic. This photo is a recreation of the popular scene where Jack holds Rose over the edge of the bow. Knowing that Skipper generally did lose his crew in kind of a tragic way, this is actually really fitting and quite sad. Pre-promise Zelda room. I believe this entry is referring to the fact that you can actually access Zelda's room, which at first glance seems to be inaccessible, as you can only catch a glimpse of her room through a cracked door. However, if you follow this secret path, you can actually access her room, assuming that you've unlocked the claw shots. In her room, you can find her diary, which talks about the events of the beginning of the game, though these are through her eyes. It's almost a little sad to see how worried she was for Link, showing both her concern and her care for Link in her diary entries. Knowing that Zelda is presumably in danger, while Link can't do much other than move forward, is even sadder knowing that she cares so much for Link. Throughout the game, we can see Link visibly frustrated time after time as he felt he wasn't strong enough to protect Zelda, and knowing that Link could actually get into her room and read these diary entries adds another layer of realism to the entire situation. Sheikah Stone Bullseye. I believe this entry refers to the Sheikah Stones, or Gossip Stones, found in various locations by playing the harp by groups of blue butterflies. If you didn't know already, these stones have a variety of secrets to them, whether it's a physical reaction to something you do, or some wild comment that they make when you speak with them. This entry is talking about the fact that you can shoot these stones in the eye to get 1 green rupee. For every arrow that you shoot, you gain 1 more rupee. But a couple of the other physical reactions that you can get from these stones, placing a bomb by it to get it to take off like a rocket ship and then explode, which also actually occurs in Ocarina of Time. You can also try blowing your gust bellow onto the stone to make it shrink in size, as well as spinning it around with your whip. Honorable mentions. We only have 2 honorable mentions for the tip of the iceberg. And the first one is Gust Bellow Spinning Rupees. This refers to the satisfying noise that the rupees make when you spin them with the Gust Bellow. During my first playthrough, I often found myself stopping many times to sit and spin rupees. Seriously, this noise is so satisfying. The next and final honorable mention is drawing a Triforce on the Goddess Walls. Once you get to a certain point in the game, you are introduced to Goddess Walls. These special stones are uncovered again by playing the harp by a group of blue butterflies. The function of this wall is actually really cool, as you can use the motion controls or your joystick to actually draw a certain shape that correlates with certain items that you will be rewarded. The Triforce of which is the hardest to draw by far. If you do manage to draw a Triforce on the Goddess Walls, you will be rewarded with fairies who will completely heal you. Although it is quite tricky to draw this, so make sure to draw it just like I am showing here. But don't worry, if you draw it wrong, you won't get fairies, but you will get bombs, hearts, or rupees. I actually forgot to mention you can get arrows from these walls as well, so be sure to use these walls to your advantage. Jars can roll. At first, I thought this entry was talking about the fact that you can roll jars similarly to how you can roll bombs, but it's more likely that this entry is referring to blowing the pots with your Gust Bellow. As you can see, the physics that allow you to roll these pots also allow for you to completely scatter these pots in every which direction with your Gust Bellow. I personally never realized this, and it's actually really fun to sit and blow pots around left and right. Gaypora Bath. We spoke earlier about the secret path to Zelda's room, but when taking this path at night, it can be revealed by looking through a grate in the ceiling that the reasoning for not being able to access the specific bathroom at night is actually because Headmaster Gaypora is taking a bath. It's a little creepy that the devs thought we should be able to peep on the Headmaster in his birthday suit, but I can see why they added this funny little addition to the game. Hidden Hearts. I'm not sure exactly what this entry refers to, but if it's referring to heart containers, you can always look up a guide to find all the heart piece locations. However, if it's not, then my best guess is the secret hearts that you get from sitting. In a lot of Zelda games, you can actually rest at any bench or stool. Doing so for a short duration of time will actually start to slowly fill your heart containers back up. You can even get health from sitting on toilets, and when you stand up, you hear this, which I think implies that Link going to the bathroom helps restore his hearts. Yeah, gross. Project Sword Parry. It's hard to pin exactly what this entry is talking about, but I would assume that it has to do with the fact that if you time your sword strikes correctly, then you can actually parry some attacks with your sword. Though this mostly just works with incoming projectiles, which is nothing new to 3D Zeldas, but is still fun to learn. Deku Baba Bombs. This entry refers to the fact that Deku Babas, a well-known recurring enemy across the Zelda franchise, will actually swallow a bomb if thrown, placed, or rolled near it. This causes the Deku Baba to explode from the inside. Again, a pretty brutal death that you don't really think about since they just puff up into a cloud of smoke. Beetle Ship's Secret. Beetle's shop is one of the most visited locations in Skyward Sword, as you have to find his shop floating over Skyloft. No matter what you're buying, Beetle's air shop will surely aid you during your journey in Skyward Sword. But did you know that you can actually find his shop at night? You can do this by going over to his Sky Island. There you can find Beetle sitting by a campfire, as well as start a quest called Beetle's Missing Beetle. Pretty cool little secret that some people don't happen to find on the first playthrough. Net Reflects Demise. This entry refers to the final boss fight for the game, so spoiler warning if you have not gotten that far yet. In the second stage of the final battle with the Demon King Demise, there is a little trick that you can do that will actually leave him stunned. Not paralyzed by an attack or anything, but stunned with confusion. Apparently you can actually pull out your bug net, and to our surprise, Demise will just look at it, confused. After attempting this for myself, it's evident that this little Easter egg was actually only present for the original Skyward Sword on the Wii. Although it's simply not possible to do this on the HD version, it's still a funny little Easter egg that makes one of the most serious battles in all of Zelda a little less serious. Gust Bellows can distract. I'm not sure what this entry was referring to, so I attempted to use the Gust Bellow on a handful of enemy types to see if it had any sort of effects. As it turns out, the Gust Bellow can actually stun a lot of the enemies as you assault them with wind. I was never aware of this, and it's actually pretty useful, although it doesn't work with some enemies, with the Moblin not being affected by the Gust Bellow at all. Tingle Doll. Again, going back to Zelda's room, we can actually find a Tingle Doll, which, if you don't know, Tingle is a fan favorite Zelda character who makes his first appearance in Majora's Mask and actually has his own series of games on the DS. Although Tingle is weird, he's still an OG character and a staple of the franchise. Time Crystals can kill. If you didn't know already, time crystals are crystals found in the Lanayru Desert. These crystals are a resource native to Lanayru, and there's a whole mine dedicated to the extraction of the resource. Link can activate these crystals by hitting them with either his sword or a long-range attack. This results in a set perimeter around the crystal in which you travel back in time. Usually, this reveals lush environments in the harsh desert, insinuating that Lanayru was once a grassland, similar to how it appears in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. In activating these crystals, piles of bones that are laying around the area will actually transform into bokoblins or other enemies from the past. Similarly, when holding a time crystal or using one in a cart, as you move with it, the perimeter surrounding the crystal moves. Everything that leaves this perimeter is reverted to its current desert state, meaning Link can essentially go back in time and change the outcome of these enemies' deaths. He does this by reviving the enemies from the past, and then killing them again by forcing them out of the crystal's perimeters. Now, if you apply even the most simple time travel logic here, it means that Link is going back in time and directly recausing their deaths by changing the way or location in which they died. Skyward Strike Charge Speed. This entry is referring to the different charge speeds for the different state of the Goddess Sword or Master Sword after its completion. Now, this charge is reduced significantly when the Master Sword is crafted. However, surprisingly in Hero Mode, the charge for the Goddess Sword is equal to the speed of the charge of the Master Sword. And when you upgrade the Goddess Sword to the Master Sword in Hero Mode, the charge is actually removed completely for an instant Skyward Strike. The Master Sword in Hero Mode also fires a beam that can go further than before, and this beam itself changes size and shape. A really cool addition for those willing to get that far into the game in Hero Mode. Honorable mentions. Some honorable mentions for level 2 are Rupin Gets Angry. This refers to the shop owner, Rupin, who will actually get really annoyed with you if you leave his shop without buying something. Overall, Rupin seems to not like Link very much. The second that you don't have enough rupees for anything, or God forbid you are just window shopping, he will give you a very annoyed look. The second honorable mention is Full Speed Beetle. Now, the Beetle item is apparently infamous for being hated by the community, but I personally loved this little thing throughout my first playthrough, and taking my time to fully upgrade it is so much more than worth it, as it can speed up as well as grab things. Here you can see before and after of the speed, and yeah, it really does make all the difference. The final honorable mention for level 2 is the Skyward Sword Orchestra. This entry refers to the fact that Zelda Skyward Sword was the first Zelda in history to include an original orchestral score. This led to one of the most intense, action-packed, and emotional titles in the Zelda franchise, and my personal favorite Zelda soundtrack. Mushroom secrets. There are mushrooms found all over the surface land in Barrenwoods region, but what we want specifically is one of these glittering mushrooms. When hit, these mushrooms release a golden dust that you can actually collect into a bottle and use against enemies to stun them, or you can even pour them on bugs to make them easier to catch. This dust is called glittering mushroom spores and can prove to be pretty useful. I actually didn't know about this my first playthrough. Tears. The sacred tears are an object found only in the Silent Realm. There are 4 different types native to each region in which the Silent Realm is entered. I'm not entirely sure what this entry is referring to, but the Silent Realm has become an infamous part in Zelda, as there are similar mechanics in Twilight Princess that a lot of players truly despise. Before playing, I was warned about the Silent Realm parts as if they were some bad thing, and though they can be quite difficult, I actually enjoy them a lot as they offer a challenge that's quite different to the standard puzzles and fighting present in every game. Even if a lot of players hate the Silent Realm and gathering the sacred tears, I don't think it's as bad as most fans make it out to be. Slingshot Flame Blowout. Harp credits. This entry is really simple but a cool addition to the game. During the end credits of the game, you can actually play your goddess harp with the same controls as in the game. I personally never realized this, but I wanted to try it, so I actually fought Demise just to see this for myself. Deku Baba Fruit. I was absolutely stunned by this entry, as in all of my research I actually couldn't find a Deku Baba fruit, but the closest thing that I could think of is the Life Tree fruit, which, spoiler alert, plays the essential role of being fed to the Thunder Dragon Lanayru in order for him to play his song for you. This is done by doing a number of tasks that play on changing the outcome of the past thanks to the time shift crystals, and after playing Back to the Future for a while, you're supposed to plant the tree in the Temple of Hylia, but if you didn't know this, you can actually plant it just about anywhere. It doesn't really do anything if you plant it anywhere else, since it does need to be in this specific place for it to grow, but some people actually didn't know this, myself included. If you do plant it somewhere else, you can simply dig it up to continue the main storyline. Resistance People Lumpy Pumpkin. If you've played Twilight Princess yourself, you might have noticed this while visiting the Lumpy Pumpkin. But there's actually a group of familiar faces inside the shop in which some players may recognize. Shad, Aru, Ice, and Telma's doppelgangers can be seen, all of which are members of a group called the Resistance, which are in Twilight Princess, found in Telma's bar in Hyrule Castletown. They work undercover to restore and hold peace in Hyrule, and spoiler alert, Link later joins the group in the events of this game. Here we can see that Crete looks like Shad, Rusta looks like Aru, Kina resembles Ise, and Poom looks like Telma. Though I haven't played Twilight Princess yet, it's always cool to see recurring characters or designs. Smoky Bear. In the Lanayru shipyard after fighting Moldarak for the second time, if you search around, you'll find a couple images on the wall, one in which references Smokey the Bear's iconic slogan, "Only you can prevent wildfires." The following image says only you can warn your coworkers early enough to avoid pirate attacks. Zert. Learning this, I'm kinda interested into seeing the Japanese version of this poster, which might have a different reference that caters more towards Japanese audiences. Maybe one of you can dig this up and let me know in the comments. Glittering Spores upgrade. I know I mentioned the glittering spores earlier, but they can also be poured on hearts to create fairies, or poured on rupees to make more valuable rupees. Although I did test it on more valuable rupees, and it looks like it can't go any higher than a red rupee, which is worth 20 rupees. In fact, if you get greedy and try to go any higher, it will start going back down only to turn into a black rupee, which is negative 10 rupees. I actually didn't even know black rupees existed until now, which I actually think is kind of cool, even if they do take rupees away from you. Skydiving creatures. When skydiving in Skyward Sword, if you fly up as high as you can go on your loft wing, and then jump off and perform a skydive, you can actually encounter these odd, colorful flying squirrel-like creatures, which will actually try to hit and knock Link out of the sky, causing him to fall to his death. Not really. They start forming a cute little circle around Link, and if you can gather them all, you get 20 rupees. 10 out of 10 experience, would try again. Konpedo candy. Konpedo candy is a popular sugar candy that's native to Japan. You might find it looking a bit familiar, and that's because the gratitude crystals mentioned earlier are actually based on the shape and even color of Konpedo candy. I personally think this candy looks delicious, and I really would want to try it. Honorable mentions. Some honorable mentions for level 3 are Petrus falls in love with you. This entry refers to the character at the item storage named Petrus. At first glance, Petrus seems to be unbothered by your presence, perhaps even a little annoyed to have to deal with you. But after a certain point in game, if you visit the item storage often, she will actually mistake your need to get empty bottles for a secret affection that you hold towards her. This eventually makes her very flirtatious and a bit shy whenever you do come by. When she gets to this point, you can actually visit her house at night and she will ask you how you feel about her. You can either return her affection or reject her. If you return her affection, it's assumed that you two begin dating. The next and final honorable mention for level 3 is Petrus's father, Peter. If you visited Peter and played his minigame, you might be shocked seeing Peter walk around Petrus's house. At first, I thought Petrus was asking me out right in front of her current husband, but it turns out that Peter is actually Petrus's father. And if you do reject her, he will actually be very happy that her secret admirer has stopped coming around. Fi backwards Japanese. Since I haven't mentioned her until now, Fi is a legendary goddess's creation and an assistant to Link. Before, spoiler warning, becoming the Master Sword, as her spirit resides inside of the Goddess Sword and then the Master Sword upon its forged by Link. Many players remember Fi's voice, especially the original Wii Skyward Sword players, as in the original release, Fi was stated to be incredibly annoying and unhelpful, usually just stating the obvious over and over again, becoming an annoyance to most players. But to get back on track, if you listen to her speak, it may sound like some ancient mystical language spoken by the gods and their kin. However, upon reversing her any line, you can actually notice that she is simply speaking in Japanese. Something even some Japanese-speaking players didn't even notice at first, as it's a very subtle and well-executed addition to the game. Whip can grab falling items. To continue my justification that the whip is a good item, if you ever have an item that is falling out of your reach, try using your whip to grab it at the last second. Although this entry is pretty straightforward, I wanted to try it for myself. Pretty cool, but I know a lot of people will still think it's a useless item. Hierophide Song of Hero. This entry refers to the Skyward Sword track Song of Hero, but specifically the 10th anniversary tribute, which was released 2 years ago as of the recording of this video. This version of the song has heavy themes from the overworld theme, otherwise known as the main theme of Zelda. Here's the original Song of Hero. And here's the 10th anniversary tribute. As you can hear, it's an absolutely magnificent rendition of the song, and a great gift to both long-time and new fans. Enemies can kill each other. To my knowledge, the only enemy I've ever seen kill another is the Deku Hornet. If you shoot the Hornet's hive while a Bokoblin is directly underneath, the Bokoblin will get swarmed by Deku Hornets. You can also evade the Hornets by running past any unsuspecting Bokoblin, who they will then attack. Some of these enemies truly have it rough. Jars hurt enemies. I'm not sure what this entry is referring to, as there are a number of things that you can carry in bottles to damage or stun an enemy, but if this is referring to pots, however, then throwing a pot at an enemy does hurt it. Go ahead and try it out. Water heart plants. If you didn't know this already, if you use a bottle of water on a used heart flower, you can actually cause a new flower to sprout. I wanted to try this on hero mode, and unsurprisingly, it actually doesn't. Who would have thought that you genuinely can't find hearts on hero mode? Guspello heart flower. Again, back to both the Guspello as well as the heart flower. Another satisfying way that you can use the Guspello is to cause the hearts to pop right off of their flowers. And if you keep shooting your Guspello at it, it causes the heart to fly in the air, very similar to how a ping pong ball will float over a hairdryer. When gathering gameplay for this entry, I seriously sat and played around with this a bit longer than necessary. Honorable mentions. We only have one honorable mention for level 4, and that is Skyward Sword outfit in Tears of the Kingdom. In Tears of the Kingdom, Link can find a number of outfits inspired from previous incarnations of Link, but my favorite by far is the Skyward Sword outfit. With Tears of the Kingdom taking place largely in the sky, thanks to the return of the Sky Islands due to the Zonai tribe this time, coupling this fact with wearing Skyward Sword Link's outfit, this game can sometimes truly feel like the sequel or continuation of Skyward Sword that we never had. And spoiler alert, but having worn this outfit during the retrieval of the Master Sword from the Light Dragon's head, I will never forget this moment, as flying through the beautiful sky on a dragon only to pull out and retrieve the Master Sword just gave me one of the best moments I've ever experienced with Skyward Sword Link, or at least his outfit. Demise Ganondorf theme. Now I don't know if I'm just deaf, but it took me way longer to pin down the connection between these two themes than it should have. Now both Demise and Ganon have many themes, but I think this entry is referring to the Phase 2 OST for the Demise battle, and the OST for the Phase 2 Calamity Ganon battle in Breath of the Wild. These were the two that I've personally found that have the most similarity. Groose Minish Cap descendants. At first, I thought this entry was saying that the Minish were direct descendants of Groose, to which I thought, huh? But after doing some research in the story and the lore of Minish Cap, the 12th mainline Zelda title released for the Game Boy Advance in 2004, I soon realized that there was a tribe of human-like people that lived in the sky, the Wind Tribe. Now, this tribe has apparently lived with the wind for so long that they gained its power. They left to live in the sky after originally being on the surface for many years. They have red hair and are similar in appearance to both the Guerdo tribe and more notably Groose. Yes, that's right, this theory is implying that the Wind Tribe are the direct descendants of Groose. And I actually quite like this theory, as it explains why the Wind Tribe would choose to go live in the sky, as if the tribe originated with Groose. Maybe after hearing stories of Skyloft and the Sky Islands, the Wind Tribe decided to leave Hyrule and to live in the land above the surface. Something only Groose would call it, as he was inferred to be one of the first humans to populate the lands below Skyloft. Demise from Lorule. Lorule is essentially a dark and mirrored version of Hyrule, seen in A Link Between Worlds and A Link to the Past. It is a land very similar to Hyrule, but many battles broke out for the power of its own Triforce, and thus the ancestors of Lorule's then Princess Hilda decided to destroy the Triforce. Unbeknownst to them, this caused Lorule to slowly rip apart, and it's now a land very similar to the Still World and the new Legend of Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom. It's thought that Demise originated in Lorule and bursted through some kind of rift to Hyrule in order to initiate his attack on the goddess Hylia. But some people now believe that it's actually the depths, which appear in Tears of the Kingdom, that Demise would eventually burst through to take over the lands of Hyrule. Skyloft and Breath of the Wild. Some fans seem to think that the Great Plateau region is actually Skyloft itself. When comparing the map of these two regions, if you rotate either one of these maps 90 degrees, you can roughly see the same shape of Skyloft in the Great Plateau region. with some major landmarks from both areas corresponding with each other's locations. Similarly, it's also known that the Spring of Power in Breath of the Wild is the same exact spring as Skyview Spring in Skyward Sword, which in my opinion is such a cool addition. I really do love to see callbacks to previous games, and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom do a pretty good job at this. Arrows can pierce floating hearts. If you shoot a heart with an arrow, you can actually get it to pierce the heart, and if you get the angle just right, you can pin the heart to the wall. Although I did play for a while and couldn't naturally come across an instance where this mechanic was practical, if you ever had a heart that you really needed and it was falling out of reach, you could hypothetically shoot it with your arrow and save yourself a game over. Gorko Triforce. This entry refers to the interaction between Gorko, the lone Goron traveler in Faron Woods, and Link. At one of the goddess walls, he will teach you, or give you hints rather, on how to draw certain obtainable objects. During one of these hints, he refers to an ancient text that talks about the Triforce. Although he can't quite make it out himself, many fans wonder how on earth he obtained this information, or rather, who wrote these ancient texts. Perhaps the goddess Hylia herself, or maybe Phi was her scribe since you draw with the sword? It's hard to say as no one really knows, but I think this is actually very interesting to speculate on. Zombie Bokoblin afraid of sacred shields. I tested this out myself, and sure enough, the zombie Bokoblins are scared of the sacred shield. I'm surprised I actually didn't realize this sooner, as the sacred shield quickly became my favorite shield in the game, with myself even putting in the time to upgrade to the divine shield. Now looking back in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense that the shield repels zombie Bokoblins, as the final upgrade of this shield reveals that the shield, in its most powerful form, is called the Goddess Shield, fully decorated with the head of the goddess herself. Though not naming this the Hylia Shield in contrast to the Hylian Shield was definitely a missed opportunity. Girahim in Breath of the Wild. Although I couldn't find any trace of Girahim's existence or presence in Breath of the Wild, I actually found this insane mod by the YouTuber Waikuteru. This mod allows you to battle Girahim in Breath of the Wild after going through a custom Skyview Temple Breath of the Wild dungeon. Although this is simply just a mod, I of course think it's always awesome to get a taste of some new Skyward Sword content. The final honorable mentions are Phi as in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and Hyrule Warriors. Phi's voice can be heard both in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and she actually appears as a playable character in the spin-off Hyrule Warriors. I think it's always cool to see Phi again, especially in the form of the Master Sword, as forging the Master Sword ourselves was one of the coolest experiences in all of Zelda. And the final honorable mention for the video is the Kikwi to Kokiri to Korok timeline. This entry just points out that the Kikwi, a race exclusive to Skyward Sword, and their evolution to the Kokiri that we know and love in Ocarina of Time, as well as the de-evolution from Kokiri to Korok, a creature that bears much more resemblance to the Kikwi than they do to the Kokiri. How this evolution and then de-evolution work is completely unknown, but it's still a very weird chain of events in the series franchise. With that being said, what do you think caused them to evolve and then devolve? Leave your answers down in the comments below. And with that, we have finished our Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword Iceberg. Whether you played Skyward Sword during its original release for Wii, or you recently tried it for the first time on the HD Switch port, Skyward Sword has always had a place in a lot of Zelda fans' hearts and will never be forgotten, especially now that it's been ported to the Switch. If you have yet to explore the world of Skyloft and the surface below, I highly recommend giving it a shot, as it was truly one of the best experiences I've ever had on a 3D Zelda game. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next installment of Exploring the Depths.